Hello and welcome to my channel. This is Darcy's Misadventures with Mixed Media. And today I am doing a little something for the How Do You Do Art challenge for August, which is hashtag Artist Appreciation August. And I have chosen to do a piece inspired by Niki de Saint Phalle. She was a French born artist who had early onset rheumatoid arthritis. I was looking up artists that had rheumatoid arthritis. I already knew that Renoir had it, and so I was curious to see who else had it and that, continued to do art. So I found her. She was the only female on the list. So I was like, oh, let me check her out. And turns out I actually really like her art. She's got these nanas sculptures, which are these voluptuous, gorgeous women with a lot of color, um, bold, big, bold drawings for the boobs and the butts and just really fantastic shapes. If I draw a woman, I usually would draw them either wonky or big, or I don't know. I just loved them. She called them nanas, which translates in English to broads or chicks. They were voluptuous figures that allude to historical fertility symbols, celebratory of the female form. And she has different totems and stuff with like snakes and some different and then also the tree of life. I found a couple paintings of hers that were the tree of life, which is what inspired me to do this piece. And I'm going to read an overview from Wikipedia about her because I think it's important to learn about artists that we like, or that just to learn about them, just to see what life was for different artists. So I'm just going to read from Wikipedia. Fast forward if you don't like to hear people talk about other people. I don't know. I want to do a little bit more research into her too. Like when I was researching Mary Lloyd Jones, I found a documentary about her and everything, which I prefer to watch a documentary over reading, but that's just me. So Niki de Saint Phalle was born Catherine Marie Agnes Phalle de Saint Phalle, I guess, 29 October 1930, and she died in 21 May 2002. She was a French sculptor, painter, filmmaker, and author of colorful hand-illustrated books. Widely noted as one of the few female monumental sculptors, Saint Phalle was also known for her social commitment and work. She had a difficult and traumatic childhood and a much disrupted education, which she wrote about many decades later. After an early marriage and 2 children, she began creating art in a naive, experimental style. She first received worldwide attention for angry, violent assemblages which had been shot by firearms. These evolved into nanas, light-hearted, whimsical, colorful, large-scale sculptures of animals, monsters, and female figures. Her most comprehensive work was the Tarot Garden, a large sculpture garden containing numerous works ranging up to house-sized creations. Saint Phalle's idiosyncratic style has been called outsider art. She had no formal training in art, but associated freely with many other contemporary artists, writers, and composers. Her books and abundant correspondence were written and brightly colored in a childish style, but throughout her lifetime she addressed many controversial and important global problems in the bold way children often use to question and call out unacceptable neglect. Throughout her creative career, she collaborated with other well-known artists such as Jasper Johns, Robert Rauschenberg, Larry Rivers, and composer John Cage, and architect Mario Botta, as well as dozens of less-known artists and craftspersons. For several decades, she worked especially closely with Swiss kinetic artist Jean Tinguely. I don't know if that's pronounced correctly, who also became her second husband. In her later years, she suffered from multiple chronic health problems attributed to repeated exposure to airborne glass fibers and petrochemical fumes from the experimental materials she had used in her pioneering artworks, but she continued to create prolifically until the end of her life. A critic has observed that Saint Phalle's insistence on exuberance, emotion, and sensuality, her pursuit of the figurative, and her bold use of color have not endeared her to everyone in a minimalist age. She was well known in Europe, but her work was little seen in the U.S. until her final years in San Diego. Another critic said, "The French-born, American-raised artist is one of the most significant female and feminist artists of the 20th century, and one of the few to receive recognition in the male-dominated art world during her lifetime." Throughout her career, Saint Phalle was outspoken in addressing important religious conflict, pandemic health, race, gender, reproductive rights, food security, climate change, and cultural issues of the time. Her Tirs, T-I-R-S, series and assemblages reflected the violence of early 1960s Algerian war for independence from France and asserted her rebellion as part of second-wave feminism. In spite of the spectacular use of firearms in her Tirs series of early work, she supported gun control. The fashion world fixated on her appearance during the second half of the 60s, with photo spreads of her in prominent fashion magazines and designer Marc Bohan of Dior designing clothes exclusively for her. Her personal style of dress during the mid-60s inspired designer Yves Saint Laurent to create his Le Smoking trouser suits in 1966, versions of which he continued to produce for decades afterwards. Her enormous, curvaceous nanas celebrated the fecund female form, featuring large breasts and buttocks, splayed limbs, joyous dance postures, and often black skin. She was one of the earliest artistic champions of AIDS awareness, creating artworks and widely distributed educational books. Shortly before her death, she exhibited drawings critical of the George W. Bush administration. In addition to her artworks, she wrote extensively in both French and English and granted numerous interviews. Much of this material is collected in her archives. Wayne Coyne of the Flaming Lips cited Saint Phalle's sculpture Firebird as direct inspiration for the cover art of their hugely successful 2002 album Yoshimi Battles in the Pink Robots. In 1955, Saint Phalle had visited Antoni Gaudi's Parc Güell in Barcelona, Spain, which inspired her to use diverse materials and found objects as essential elements in her art. Another influence was the Parco de Mostri in Bomarzo in the Lazio region of Italy. In the late 1950s, she and Jean Tinguely had visited Le Palais Adél, built by Ferdinand Cheval, known as Le Facteur Cheval. I don't know if I'm pronouncing any of that correct. In Hauteries, French, as well as Simon Rodia's Watts Towers in Los Angeles in the early 1960s. Both these latter locations were examples of fantastical outsider art, an architecture built by ordinary working men of modest means, but an expansive vision. Saint Phalle decided that she wanted to make something similar, a magnificent sculpture garden, but created by a woman. The founding sponsors for her ambitious project were members of the Italian Agnelli family. In 1974, Saint Phalle became ill with pulmonary abscess from her work with polyester and was hospitalized in Arizona. She then recuperated in St. Moritz, Switzerland. She reconnected with Marella Agnelli, a friend from the 1950s in New York, and told Agnelli about her ideas for a fantasy garden. In 1978, Agnelli's brothers, Carlo and Nicola Caracciolo, Cacciolo, sorry I'm butchering that name, offered a parcel of their land in Tuscany for the garden site. In 1974, Saint Phalle created a trio of monumental nanas installed next to the River Lane in Hanover, Germany. City leaders were initially inundated with over 20,000 letters of complaint, but eventually the figures were affectionately nicknamed Sophie, Charlotte, and Caroline in honor of three of the city's historical women. The dispute between supporters and opponents of the statues was resolved by a tug-of-war contest. In 1975, Saint Phalle wrote the screenplay for A Dream Longer Than the Night. I'm not reading the French part of that. Later also called Camélia et le Dragon. And she recruited many of her artist friends to help make it into a film, a phantasmagorical tale of dragons, monsters, and adolescence. A young girl is held captive by a dragon, manages to escape, and must explore 7 doors of mystery to find love. Saint Phalle's daughter Laura was the lead character in the film, appearing with Saint Phalle. Jean Tingley and other artist friends. Peter Whitehead composed the music for the filming. She designed several pieces of furniture, which were later displayed in the facade of the Palais des Beaux-Arts in Brussels. From 1968 to 1988, she also worked on The Last Night I Had a Dream, a sculptural relief painting that included many elements from her earlier life and dreams. In 1976, she retreated to the Swiss Alps to refine her plans for the sculpture park. In 1977, Ricardo Menon, an Argentinian, became her assistant. He would work closely with her until 1986. In 1977, she worked with English writer Constantine Mulgrave to design sets for The Traveling Companion based on a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, but the project was never completed. She and Mulgrave lived together for around 4 years, but Tingley remained a continually reappearing presence in her life. In 1977, she also visited Mexico and New Mexico in search of more extensive artistic inspirations. In 1978, she started to lay out her sculpture garden in an abandoned quarry in Tuscany, about 100 kilometers northwest of Rome, near the west coast of the Italian peninsula. The following year, sites were cleared and foundations were established. In 1979, she produced the first of what would become a new series of sculptures, the Skinnies. These were flat, planar, see-through outlines of heads and figures highlighted by patches of color. In some ways, they resembled the colorful sketches and drawings, but scaled up to monumental size. The series also symbolized her struggle against emphysema and illness. She continued to produce her nanas in addition to her new style of sculpture, and both styles to figures would appear in her tarot garden project. In 1980, she and her team began to build the first architectural sculpture in the garden. As the project progressed, she started taking lessons in the Italian language to better communicate with local workers. The second crew member she hired was Ugo Saletti, a 50-year-old part-time postal delivery man who discovered a love for mosaic work on the project. He would work on the project for 36 years and recruit his nephews to join. Some family members are still involved in maintaining the site. It goes on to tell more, and I will link this down below, but I'm running out of time here. So there's a lot more to learn about her life. She died in 2002. And so that is that. I hope you guys have enjoyed hearing about Niki de Saint Phalle and seeing me draw the Tree of Life that was inspired by her drawing of the Tree of Life using a mixture of colors and black and white. Niki also had words on her tree, so I will read off some of the words I've got here. I've got life, peace, dream, create, birth, healing, pain, nature, celebrate, regret, tenacity, feel, rebellion, death, good, evil, climb, deep, death, anger, love, stand, and delight, and forgiveness, I think is the last one. Because she had words on her Tree of Life too, so I figured I would too. So I hope you have enjoyed this creative endeavor today. Hope you guys have a delightful day. Love you.